Welcome to Shoe Leather Faith. My name's Robert McMillan, and we're dealing with love in marriage. And last time we covered the misconceptions about marriage, and now we're going to look into the purposes of marriage. I found 4. You may find more than I did, but I found 4, and that'll keep us going for 2 sessions here. So let's get into that. And by the way, I'm working on about 150-page document full of notes, outlines and charts that I want you to have for free on this very issue of love within the family. And what I'd like you to do is, when I get it up about the middle of this series, I'll put it on my website, www.shoeleatherfaith.org, and you download it for free. I don't want anything back from you. You don't have to leave me your email address or any personal information. I just want to use it to encourage you to get into the Bible. So let's look at the purposes of marriage. By the way, before we get started, if you haven't done it already, would you just right now subscribe to this channel? That lets me know that there are people who are listening. And if you like this video, at the end of the video, would you hit the like button? And through this video, if there's any question that comes to mind or any response that you have from anything I said, put it down below. There's a place just down below for comments. I'd appreciate it because it helps me understand what I must provide for you from the Bible to help you in your walk with God. So let's look at the purposes of marriage. We'll cover 2 now and 2 the next time we meet. First, marriage is designed to promote families. In Genesis 1:28, it says, "Then God blessed them," Adam and Eve, "and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea." Both Adam and Eve would have dominion, not just Adam, over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves on the earth. That tells us we have a job to do, and it doesn't look like we're particularly doing it because the world's falling apart. We should be the best ecologists going because we've been given a task by God Himself, and we should know how seriously He takes the tasks He assigns. But marriage is designed to promote families. God told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. And by extension, everyone else of whom Adam is the federal head. Marriage is the means by which that command can be carried out. This purpose in itself forbids homosexual marriages, since homosexuals do not produce children through their sexual immorality. But that's only one issue in the homosexual problem. I'll get into that later when I feel braver than I do right now. Marriage in which the couples are unable to have children are not to be relegated to second-class status, though, as we talked about last time. The Bible clearly teaches that it is God, not your gynecologist, who opens the womb and closes it. In Genesis 29:31, it says, "When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, He opened her womb, but Rachel was barren." And in Genesis 30, verse 22, a chapter later, it says, "Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb." And then we get to the closing of the womb. 1 Samuel 1:5, "But to Hannah, the mother of Samuel, He would give a double portion." That's Elkanah, her husband. "For he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb." So realize it's the Lord who opens the womb. It is the Lord who closes the womb. Normally, we don't have to worry about that because it just happens for most of us, given enough time. Practice. The second purpose of marriage is designed to promote fulfillment. Promote fulfillment. Turn to Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 to 24. And it says there, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone." Now He's just created everything. Everything was perfect. And He looked around and He said, everything is really good. Then He looked at Adam and said, everything's not perfect here. It's not good. I will make him a helper suitable to him. That word helper, etzer, it's a word that is used more often of God in the Old Testament than of man. So it's not a lesser kind of a calling for the wife. but she's a helper comparable to him. She will help him as they have dominion over the creation. She'll be a helper to him as they raise children within a family, within a home. In verse 19 it goes on, out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So he sees a frog jump by and he says, frog. And it's a frog. But what he does see is that they're all going by in twos, in pairs. Elephant. There's an elephant, there's an elephant. I believe, this is just Robert talking, but I believe that God had him name the animals so that he would realize that by the time he's finished, he's the only one who's not named after him. So Adam, verse 20, so Adam gave names to all the cattle, to the birds of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. None of the animals fit. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept, and he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from man he made into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. She shall be called Isha, the feminine form, because she was taken out of Ish, the male form. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So marriage is designed to promote fulfillment. He realized he was unfulfilled after naming the animals. Adam knew when God created Eve that in her he would be fulfilled. Marriage is designed to promote fulfillment. And it promotes social fulfillment. Genesis 2:18. It's not good for man to be alone. It's one thing to be alone. It's entirely another thing to be lonely. And if God hadn't created Eve, Adam would have been lonely. Now God already knew what he was going to do, and he didn't get surprised by the fact that he had a whoops on his hands. He knew that he had to create Eve, and he would create Eve, but Adam had to realize it first. And that's what this whole process, naming the animals and being alone and lonely, had to do. And that's what this whole process of being alone and being lonely involved. Loneliness is perhaps the greatest destroyer of happiness in the world today. A loving home with an accepting, listening spouse is one of the ways God uses to combat loneliness. He said himself, it's not good for man to be alone. Another way to promote fulfillment is sexual fulfillment. In 1 Corinthians 7, verses 1 through 5, if you'll turn there, it says, now concerning the things of which you wrote to me, in other words, the Corinthians had sent him a letter with questions. Could you answer this for us? And he was answering those one by one. Now concerning the things of which you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her. That's a debt he owes her. And likewise also the wife to her husband. She has a debt to him. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another sexually, except with consent for a time, that you may give yourself to fasting and prayer. And the question I always ask is, how long can you pray? And come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. Meeting the sexual needs of your spouse is a duty placed upon you by God. This word in verse 3, duty, is from the Greek word meaning debt. Never forget that. You're in debt to your spouse. The third way in which marriage promotes fulfillment is in the area of spiritual fulfillment. Ephesians 5, verses 28 to 29. It says, "So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For the husband, loving his wife, is the means by which he practices the love of Christ, since he's a type of Christ, and the wife is a type of the church, the bride of Christ. For the wife, responding in love and obedience to her husband, is the means by which she practices love directed toward Christ, since she's a type of the church, the bride of Christ." We've dealt with two purposes in marriage. Marriage is designed to promote families, and marriage is designed to promote fulfillment. Marriage and fulfillment. Next week we'll get into marriage as a means of promoting purity. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video. If you have any questions, comment, put them down below, and I will see you next time.